The house I ended up renting wasn't so much a home as it was a sentence. A weather-beaten box squatting under the sun at the dead end of Dust Line Road, far out in the kind of desert where time forgets to move and even the vultures look bored. The sky out here didn't shift colors so much as it baked them into place, like everything had been cooked in the same sun-bleached oven. There was no grass, only stubborn dust and the occasional cactus that looked as tired as I felt. It wasn't really a choice. It was all I could afford after Los Angeles chewed me up, spat me out, and then billed me for the damage. I was 32. My name's Ken Morris. Once, I thought I was going to make people laugh for a living. Now, I was just trying to remember how to breathe without anxiety tightening my chest like a tourniquet. The duplex stood on its own like an exiled animal, two mirrored halves that had clearly seen better decades. Paint peeled from the wood like it was trying to escape. A rusted mailbox hung crooked, daring gravity to finish the job. The rental ad had described it as quiet desert living with room to grow. They forgot to mention and no witnesses if something eats you in your sleep. Still, it was mine. Mine and the scorpions. And maybe the ghosts of better renters before me. I was halfway through unloading a box labeled kitchen maybe, which was mostly just mismatched Tupperware and a spice rack I hadn't used since the Obama administration, when the door to the other half of the duplex creaked open. At first, I thought the heat was messing with me. That kind of shimmer you get on asphalt at noon? Yeah, like that, except it had legs, hips, and an unreasonably graceful walk. The woman who stepped out didn't just enter the scene. She arrived. Like gravity decided to adjust itself for her convenience. She was tall. Really tall. Long limbs, a dancer's posture, and skin that didn't tan so much as refract light. There was this shimmer to it, a violet undertone like moonlight filtered through amethyst. Her hair was black, but not flat, it moved like water, as if it had moods. And her eyes, I swear to whatever gods are listening, were gold. Not hazel in the sun, not warm brown. Actual. Freaking. Gold. And they locked onto mine like they were scanning my soul for entry permissions. "You're new," she said, and her voice didn't sound strange. It felt strange. Like a song you'd never heard but already missed. I blinked. Forgot the box in my hands. Forgot my own name for a second. Then, like a Windows 95 reboot, my brain spat out, yeah. I'm Ken. She extended her hand. Leery. I reached out. Her skin was cool. Not cold, not corpse cold, but like smooth stone left in shade. She shook my hand like she'd practiced the gesture but wasn't entirely sure what it was for. And her smile, too perfect, like she'd copied it from a magazine but didn't quite understand the emotional firmware behind it. She looked over my truck, then at the sagging porch step, then back at me. "You appear to be in the process of relocation. Shall I assist you with object transfer?" "Object transfer?" I repeated. She pointed at the box still in my arms. "That. Heavy, yes." I almost laughed, but something about her expression told me she was dead serious. Or maybe that she didn't understand the joke. So I shrugged. "Sure. If you want." She helped me move everything. Every box. Every chair. Even my broken futon, which she carried like it weighed nothing. She didn't grunt. Didn't sweat. Barely even blinked. And the questions. Oh God, the questions. What is the function of this toaster oven? What does it mean when a man is ghosted? Why do humans combine dairy with fermented tomato sauce and refer to it as comfort food? I answered them all because, frankly, I was too intrigued not to. But when she lifted my PlayStation and turned it over in her hands like a museum curator discovering alien tech, I couldn't help but ask, "So, where exactly are you from?" Her lips curled, not quite a smirk, not quite a lie. Not even close. A few days into my quiet exile, Leary began to appear like she belonged to the house more than the furniture. She'd knock gently, or sometimes not knock at all. Just show up, barefoot on the porch, like a mirage that had decided to become real. One morning, and I say morning in the loosest desert sense, where the sun is already up and mad at everything by 7 a.m., I opened the door to find her holding something in both hands. "I have made an offering," she announced, with the solemnity of someone delivering a diplomatic gift between two species on the brink of war. It was bread. Or, at least, something attempting to be bread. It was blue. Not moldy blue, but the kind of blue you'd see in deep-sea fish or malfunctioning LEDs. Dense, slightly glossy, and warm to the touch, like it had its own internal chemistry. "I adjusted the molecular structure for optimal compatibility with your digestive profile," she explained. I stared at it, then at her. "You baked me, alien bread." She blinked once, then answered slowly as if selecting from a menu of acceptable human responses. "Bread. Yes. That is the word." I gave it a cautious sniff. It smelled, not bad. Kind of sweet, but with an ozone tang, like someone tried to toast cinnamon in a particle accelerator. I didn't take a bite, because part of me wasn't sure it wouldn't bite back. Before I could form a polite excuse, she stepped closer. Too close. Her eyes scanned me like infrared. Her nostrils flared delicately. Then, in a voice low and serious, she said, "I've noticed your pheromone signature is unusually strong. Compatible, even." I stared at her. "My, what now?" She tilted her head slightly, as if puzzled that I didn't already know. "You emit a signal. Subtle chemical patterns carried in your exhalations, sweat, skin. Your scent." She leaned in and inhaled, not theatrically, not like someone smelling roses, but like a machine taking in data. Her eyes fluttered half shut. "My systems are responding," she said, her voice softer. Strongly. It wasn't a pickup line. She wasn't teasing. Her tone lacked all the subtle flirtation and playful irony I was used to. No smirk, no wink. She wasn't hitting on me. She was studying me. Scientifically. Biologically. Intimately. And worse, she looked like she didn't quite understand why it was affecting her, too. I took a cautious step back. "That's great. I guess. But you're kinda invading my personal space." She blinked again, stepping back with perfect mechanical precision. "Apologies. I am calibrating proximity thresholds. Social boundaries differ by species and culture. I may require correction." "Right," I said, placing the blue bread on the counter like it might explode if jostled. "Well, thank you. For this? Very neighborly." She nodded. "I have also analyzed your kitchen layout. Your food storage is improperly sealed. May I recommend adjusting your containment for optimal preservation?" "I'll think about it," I said, trying not to imagine what else she'd analyzed while I was sleeping. She didn't leave right away. She just stood there, watching me. Not like a woman interested in a man. Like a scholar trying to understand why a particular test subject had unexpectedly grown a second heart, Then she said something that made the temperature in the room shift, not warmer, not colder, but electric. I believe, she said slowly, that your biological presence is disrupting my psychical stability. I raised an eyebrow. I'm sorry. My internal regulators are detecting fluctuations. The phase is advancing faster than anticipated. Your proximity is accelerating it. She reached up and gently touched her own neck, just beneath the jawline, like she was checking a pulse only she could feel. I wanted to ask what phase meant, what cycle she was talking about, but I already knew, didn't I? Deep down, in the same instinctual place that warned mammals of earthquakes before they happen. I didn't know the science, but I recognized the look in her eyes. Hunger, not for food. Need, not yet understood. You should be cautious, she said finally, her voice like smoke wrapped in velvet. Prolonged interaction may lead to deeper synchronization. Synchronized how? I asked, already half regretting the question. She looked at me the way a satellite might look at a signal it wasn't supposed to receive, curious, intrigued, a little afraid. I don't know yet, she answered. But my species does not experience this kind of compatibility by accident. And then, with the grace of someone who could lift a couch one-handed but didn't know how to say goodbye, she turned and walked out into the blinding light of the desert. Leaving me standing in a tiny kitchen, holding my breath, next to a piece of glowing blue bread that I was definitely never going to eat, but somehow couldn't bring myself to throw away. It was Friday night when the desert decided to go off script. I was finally getting into a rhythm, wake up, drink bad coffee, write mediocre jokes, wonder if I was wasting my life, repeat. The duplex had started to feel less like exile and more like the kind of place where a man might figure things out. I'd even written a solid 2-minute bit about dating apps and how they are basically a game of romantic Russian roulette. That's when the lights went out. Not just the lights, everything. The power cut out with an audible snap, followed by the eerie silence of things that should be humming but aren't. No fridge buzz. No ceiling fan. Just me, the dark, and the sudden sense that I was being watched by something without eyes. Great, I muttered, grabbing my phone to use as a flashlight. I made my way down the narrow hallway to the breaker box, already composing my mental angry email to Desert Energy Solutions. I reached for the panel, but as my fingers touched the metal, a spark leapt out like it was alive, a blue-green arc that bit into my skin with a crackling hiss. I yelped and stumbled back, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then I heard it. A sound, low, vibrating, rhythmic, like a spaceship's heartbeat. It wasn't coming from inside the wall. It was coming through it. From her side. Leary's side. I hesitated only a second before heading out into the night, flashlight in hand. The moon was high and heavy, the desert wind dry and suspiciously quiet. My feet crunched over gravel as I crossed the shared yard. Her windows pulsed with shifting colors, not bulb light, not LED, but something organic. Alive. I knocked. Leary. My voice sounded small next to the hum. You okay in there? No answer. The hum intensified. A low harmonic tremor that I felt more in my bones than my ears. I knocked again, harder this time. Look, I don't mean to bother you, but whatever you're doing is frying my power. I've got stuff to do. The door creaked open. Leary stood in the doorway, backlit by swirling lights that looked like they belonged in a deep-sea trench, not a desert living room. Her skin wasn't just shimmering anymore, it was radiant, glowing in shades of violet and silver. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated, and she was breathing fast like she'd just run miles. She was wearing something new. Not jeans, not a tank top. A bodysuit, silver, skin-tight, sleek like liquid metal wrapped around every impossible curve of her body. It looked too advanced to be human, but too elegant to be utilitarian. It was designed for something. Something intimate. Something urgent. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. "My power's out," I said, trying to focus on her face, not the way the lights behind her danced across her silhouette like they were orbiting her. "I figured maybe. I don't know, alien fusion core malfunction." "A minor surge," she said quickly. "It will stabilize." I'm not well." "Sick?" I asked. "You need a doctor?" She laughed, not kindly, not sarcastically, but like someone on the verge of cracking open. "No Earth doctor could help with this." I stepped forward. "Come on, sit down at least." "No." Her voice snapped like a whip. I froze mid-step. She gripped the door frame like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. Her knuckles pale, her jaw tight. "You don't understand," she said, voice low and rough. "Your proximity is making it worse." I raised my hand slowly. Okay. I'll back off. Just tell me what's happening." "There's no one I can call. No emergency protocol. I just have to write it out. But you can't be near me right now. You're destabilizing everything." "I'm destabilizing what, exactly?" "Your alien hormone levels." She didn't laugh this time. She didn't smile. She whispered, "My body has selected you?" The words didn't land right away. They hovered in the air, too heavy to absorb. My brain tried to translate them, to find a metaphor, a loophole, a more logical explanation. "You're joking," I said finally. I tried to resist it. "I really did," she said, voice cracking. "But it's not something I choose. My biology, it chooses. And it chose you." I took a step back, not out of fear, not exactly, but because everything in me suddenly screamed that this moment was more important than I realized. She looked at me with eyes that burned, not with desire, but with desperation. And in that flickering light, with the alien hum all around us, I finally understood. This wasn't infatuation. It wasn't seduction. It was a storm. One she was trying, failing, to hold back. I nodded slowly. "Okay. I'm going. But if you need anything, lock your door," she said. Then she closed hers. And for a long time, I just stood there in the dark, the hum in my ears, her words echoing like a warning and a promise. "My body has selected you." She sat curled up on my couch like something half wild, half wounded, wrapped in a blanket I hadn't washed in weeks and glowing faintly through the fabric like a dimmed constellation. Her breathing was steadier now, but the edges of her presence still shimmered, not visibly, not exactly, but in a way you could feel if you stood too close. Like her molecules hadn't decided whether to stay bound together or scatter across the stars. She looked at me with that same impossible gaze, amber, burning, steady, and said in the same tone you might use to comment on the weather, "I'm not human." I sat on the floor across from her, back against the coffee table, elbows on my knees. I didn't flinch. Didn't gasp. I just said, "Yeah." I figured. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was waiting. Like the space between a question and the answer you're afraid of. "I'm a field biologist," she continued. assigned to study behavioral, neurological, and genetic markers in terrestrial species. Specifically yours. Mine. I asked, raising an eyebrow. Humans. Earth origin bits. You. Why? She hesitated, eyes drifting toward the floor as if the cheap carpet could provide a more acceptable version of the truth. Because our systems detected potential. Potential for what? She looked up. Merging. I blinked. Merging? Like, diplomatic merging? Interstellar treaties? Political exchange programs? She shook her head slowly. No. Like, reproduction. The word didn't echo, but it rang, hung there in the air like an untuned instrument. You're telling me this is, I rubbed my eyes. Alien mating season? She nodded. Her glow pulsed slightly, in sync with her pulse. Every 7 Earth years, our bodies enter a phase. A biological imperative. We suppress it, chemically, socially, until the cycle ends. Normally, I would have remained in isolation. But, your biology. She trailed off. My biology? I echoed, not sure I wanted the full report. She adjusted the blanket like a shield she didn't need but still held. Your scent. Your voice modulation. The way your neurons fire. All of it triggered a reaction. My system recognized compatibility. Deep compatibility. I let out a slow breath. Let me guess, 1 in a million. She shook her head. 1 in 9.4 million, statistically. I whistled, leaning my head back against the table. Well. Lucky me. Her lips quirked, not quite a smile, not quite sadness either. No. Unlucky. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She tucked her legs beneath her. The blanket slipped slightly, revealing skin that shimmered like silk trapped in a candle's flicker. Violet undertones, faintly iridescent, more real now, because she wasn't hiding it anymore. You're the only subject I've ever interacted with this closely, she said. At first, it was field curiosity. You were expressive. Warm. You laugh even when you're in pain. You joke when you should be crying. That's rare. I let the words hang. I didn't know what to say. My mind was still playing catch-up with the phrases reproduction, biological imperative, and 9.4 million. I didn't mean to drag you into this, she continued softly. But once the reaction began, I couldn't stop it. My body began adapting. My perception filter weakened. My emotions intensified. I started feeling things I wasn't trained for. Her hands clenched the blanket. Her voice trembled like she was ashamed of the truth she was born into. Being near you accelerates the cycle. It sharpens the need. But it also, and this part I don't understand, it calms it. Your presence triggers the chemistry, yes, but it also soothes the chaos. You make me sound like an emotional ibuprofen, I muttered. Her brow furrowed. I don't understand that reference. Never mind. She shifted her gaze to me again. There was something naked in her eyes now, not literal, but emotional. Vulnerable. Alien, but not unfamiliar. I was sent to observe, she said. To collect data. You were never supposed to know. And now. Her glow dimmed slightly. Now my nervous system is bonding to your signal. The reaction is no longer theoretical. If the cycle completes naturally, the bond will stabilize. If it doesn't, she stopped. The silence said the rest. I swallowed. You're telling me you'll die if we don't merge? Not immediately. But yes. Organ failure. Neural degradation. Psychological fracture. Eventually. I exhaled, long and shaky. That's a hell of a first date pitch. I didn't ask for this, she said, and I could hear the fracture in her tone now. I didn't plan to be vulnerable. Or to need someone. Especially not someone so statistically improbable. I looked at her, truly looked, past the glow, the skin, the suit, the stats. And what I saw wasn't a threat. Wasn't a test subject. It was a woman, trembling, trying to stay whole while her own biology betrayed her. I don't know what this is, I said, or what it's supposed to mean. But I'm here. You're not going through this alone. Her lips parted like she wanted to respond, but no words came. Instead, she simply nodded, once. And in the stillness of that desert night, with only stars and failing circuits for company, the distance between human and alien narrowed by the smallest, most human thing of all. Compassion. The next few days were a soft collapse into strangeness. The kind of days that don't register in memory as separate events, but as a haze of blurred edges, of moments half-lived and fully felt. A blur of glowing baths and quiet talks, of desert wind tapping on dusty windows and hearts learning new rhythms beneath old skins. Leary, for her part, tried to hold herself together. She soaked in some sort of liquid that shimmered like melted sapphire, a stabilization agent, she called it, meant to temper the intensity of her cycle. The blue liquid clung to her skin like a second light, and sometimes I'd pass by the half-open bathroom door and catch a glimpse of her submerged in that glow, breathing slow, eyes closed, a statue carved from bioluminescence and restraint. She drank bitter teas that smelled like moss and copper. She meditated in silence, eyes flickering behind closed lids like she was in contact with something I couldn't see. And through it all, she fought, not against me, but against herself. Against the signals her body kept sending, the gravitational pull between our cells, the strange magnetic ache of compatibility. And yet, in the quiet hours between her struggles, we talked. God, we talked. She asked about Earth with the curiosity of someone not just observing but trying to fall in love with it. She wanted to know about comedy, and why people laughed at things that hurt. About sarcasm, and how humans could mean the opposite of what they say and still be sincere. About salsa dancing, and why people would press their bodies together just to move in rhythm when there was no need to. Because it feels good, I told her once, after trying, and failing, to describe the chaos of human courtship. Because sometimes your body wants to speak a language your mouth doesn't know how to form. She'd paused at that. Her eyes softened. And in that look, I saw a galaxy full of questions finding their first answer. But it wasn't all poetic. Sometimes it was awkward. Sometimes funny. Once she asked me if Netflix and chill was a legitimate ritual or merely coded euphemism. When I laughed too long, she looked genuinely offended and said, if it involves thermal regulation and shared visual media, then why not simply say that? And through it all, I found myself watching her, not just the shimmer of her skin or the way her voice dipped low when she tried to be casual, but the cracks. The fragility. Because beneath all the otherworldly beauty and intellectual brilliance, Leary was, in a word I never expected to apply to someone not even from this planet, lonely. Profoundly, existentially lonely. She had studied my species for years. Tracked signals. Analyzed social patterns. Interpreted our broadcasts. But now she was here, in the flesh, in the dust and heat and awkwardness of one very specific human, and I don't think she knew how to handle that part, the realness, the randomness. And me? I was trying not to fall. Not just for her body, or the mystery, or the thrill of being the chosen one out of 9.4 million. But for the soul beneath her biology. For the way she tried to laugh even when she didn't understand the joke. For the way she looked at an orange sunrise like it was the first time she'd ever seen light filtered through dust. But the nights were a different story. Her symptoms always worsened after sunset, as if the absence of solar radiation triggered something deep in her neural network. She'd shiver even when it wasn't cold. Her skin would pulse with faint, rhythmic light, like heartbeat made visible. Her pupils would dilate until her eyes were almost black, and she'd sit on the far end of the couch, curled up, breath shallow, lips parted. We kept our distance. At first out of caution. Then out of unspoken agreement. A line neither of us dared cross. But every second we spent breathing the same air felt like we were orbiting something we could neither name nor ignore. A gravity that pulled more insistently with every passing hour. Sometimes she'd look at me like she was trying to memorize the way my face shifted when I wasn't speaking. Like her mind was already somewhere deeper than where her words could reach. Other times, she'd ask strange things. Like what it felt like to kiss someone not out of obligation but want. Or what humans meant when they said I don't want to ruin this, as if love was both fragile and inevitable. One night, she asked me if I believed in fate. I told her I believed in accidents that felt too perfect to be random. She didn't answer. Just leaned her head against the window and whispered something in a language that sounded like singing in starlight. And I kept pretending this was temporary. That I was strong enough to be near her without falling into her orbit completely. But each moment, each accidental brush of her fingers, each long silence charged with too much meaning, chipped away at that illusion. We weren't just heading towards something. We were already in it. And neither of us could admit it out loud, not yet. Because once we did, choice would vanish. And all that would remain, was surrender. It happened on the fourth night. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, subtle but growing, like pressure building behind a dam too old to hold. That evening, the desert sky had turned a shade of bruised orange, the wind blew in hot and restless, and everything felt just a little too quiet. Even the coyotes stayed silent, as if they knew something primal was about to break loose. I was sitting on the porch, pretending to read, when I heard the sound. Not a voice. Not footsteps. Not even something I could name. It was a frequency. A pulse. A hum that crawled into my bones and rewrote their vibration. Low. Resonant. Like the air itself was singing some alien lullaby only she could hear. Then came the smell. Like ozone and something floral. Sweet but metallic. Heavy. I dropped the book and stood. Her window, the one that faced mine, was glowing again, but not in calm waves like before. It strobed erratically, flickering like a failing heartbeat. I didn't think. I just moved. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside. And I saw her. Leary was standing in the center of the living room, barefoot on the wooden floor, hair wet and tangled from another stabilization bath. Her bodysuit clung to her skin like mercury, every contour of her form outlined in living silver. But it wasn't the suit that froze me. It was her. She was glowing, not faintly, not subtly. Her skin radiated in pulsating waves of violet and indigo, like a living star forced into a human shape. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and her hands trembled at her sides as if she was fighting against her own limbs. Leery. Don't come closer. Her voice was low. Strained. Like it hurt to speak. I froze. Hands up. It's me. You're not alone. She laughed, and it was the most broken sound I'd heard from her. You don't get it, Ken. I am alone. Even when I'm next to you, I'm inside a storm you can feel. A fire you can see. I took a careful step forward. Then let me help you through it. Her eyes snapped to mine, pupils wide, gold irises barely visible. Her whole body tensed. You are the storm, Ken, she whispered. Your scent. Your presence. Your voice. You're accelerating everything. My body wants you, demands you, and I'm trying not to let that override my mind. The air between us felt like static. Like it could snap at any moment. What happens if it does? I asked. She looked away. Then we cross a line that can't be uncrossed. Is that what you're afraid of? She didn't answer. Instead, she took a shaky step toward me, then another, until we were just a breath apart. I could see the heat trembling across her skin, could smell that electric sweetness rising from her pores. Her fingers twitched at her sides, like they were waiting for permission. I need you to understand, she said, and her voice was a plea now. This isn't seduction. It's biology. A cycle older than any words we've invented. My systems are syncing to yours whether I allow them to or not. Then don't allow it, I said softly. Choose it. She blinked, startled. I stepped closer, closing the final inch between us. You're not a machine, Leary. You're not your code or your genetics or your species. You get to decide. Even if everything in your body says must, your heart, whatever version of that you have, still gets to say want. Her lips parted. A tremor ran through her. And for a moment, the light beneath her skin flickered. Dimmed. She looked at me like I was something she'd never studied. Something she couldn't graph or chart or reduce to formulas. I'm so tired, she said, barely above a whisper. I can't fight this much longer. Then don't fight it, I said. But don't give in, either. Let's meet in the middle. Not as subject and scientist. Not as human and alien. Just, us. I reached out slowly and took her hand. It was hot. Vibrating faintly. But she didn't pull away. Her eyes shimmered. You're the anomaly, she whispered. You're not supposed to be compatible, and yet, everything in me recognizes you. Then maybe, I said, pulling her gently into an embrace, your people didn't account for the one thing humans are best at. What's that? Being unpredictable. She laughed, real this time. Soft. Honest. Fragile. And then, wrapped in violet light and desert silence, we stood there, not quite lovers, not quite strangers, two beings on the edge of something terrifyingly intimate. Not because we had to, but because, somehow, we both wanted to. It didn't begin with a kiss. It began with stillness. Not silence, but the kind of stillness that happens between two heartbeats, when time forgets to move forward. When the air holds its breath. When everything around you, the stars, the floor, your own lungs, waits for permission to exist. We were sitting on the floor of her living room, the alien hum of her systems long since gone quiet. The light had dimmed to a soft pulse inside her skin, no longer wild or erratic, just steady, rhythmic, alive. Her hand was still in mine, and neither of us had spoken for a while. Words had become unnecessary. They didn't fit anymore. Not here. Not now. And then it happened. Not a sound. Not a spark. Just alignment. And shift. Like something deep within both of us leaned forward at the same moment. And the world fell away. It wasn't like touching. It was being touched. By thought. By memory. By the very essence of someone else's experience reaching out and folding gently into yours. I didn't just see her world. I felt it. Her memories didn't play like images. They arrived. Full, immediate, undeniable. I was standing on glass planes that stretched beyond the horizon, under a sky split by twin moons, one silver, one rose gold. I breathed in air that shimmered like sound waves, and I felt the gravity of a world that sang to itself in frequencies no human ear could process. I saw cities suspended in magnetized clouds, their towers shaped like spirals and soft flame. I tasted fruit that pulsed with its own energy. I watched her as a child, chasing phosphorescent insects over a field of shifting moss, laughing in a voice much higher, but unmistakably hers. I saw the moment she was chosen. Not born into importance, but calculated into relevance. Identified by her aptitude. Her clarity. Her rarity. I felt the weight of the training. The endless scans. The ethical simulations. The promise that emotion must never interfere with observation. And then I felt the moment she arrived on Earth and saw me for the first time. It wasn't curiosity she felt. It was recognition. And through that, she saw me. Not just my image. But my truths. She stood on the peeling stage of a near-empty comedy bar, hearing my final punchline echo into silence. She sat on the floor of my childhood bedroom, watching a younger version of me curl around a Game Boy, trying to drown out the sound of my parents fighting down the hall. She stood beside me at the train station where I watched the only person I'd ever really loved walk away without looking back. She felt my loneliness. Not the kind that comes from being single, or broke, or out of place, but the bone-deep ache of not being seen. And she saw it. All of it. And did not turn away. We weren't just connected. We were entangled. Not biologically, not yet, but neurologically, emotionally, spiritually. In that moment, alien and human didn't matter. There was no translation, no cultural filter. Just me. Just her. Two souls, unzipped. Interwoven. I don't know how long it lasted. Time stopped being relevant. But when it ended, when gravity returned and breath became necessary again, we found ourselves still sitting on the floor, knees touching, hands joined, skin warm with borrowed light. She looked at me with something more than recognition. Something more than need. It was awe. "You let me in," she whispered. I nodded. "So did you." She brought one hand to my face, her thumb grazing my cheek as if checking to see if I was still real. Her skin no longer glowed violently, now it radiated softly, like embers remembered after the fire. Her voice trembled. "No one has ever seen me like that. Not even my own kind." I smiled, not out of bravado, not out of charm, but from the pure simplicity of truth. "Then they're missing out." She let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. "We didn't kiss." "Not yet." There was no rush. Because for the first time since she'd arrived, and maybe the first time in my life, we weren't just bodies orbiting a decision. We were already one. Even if only for a moment. And maybe that was what made the next moment possible. Not the biology. Not the heat. Not the cycle. But the choice, ours. Together. We didn't sleep that night. Not because of desire. Not because of fear. But because some moments are too sacred for sleep to interrupt. We lay side by side on the floor, the lights low, her skin no longer glowing but carrying a warmth that felt like it had always been meant to rest beside mine. Our hands stayed intertwined, not out of urgency, but out of something gentler. A promise not yet spoken, but already kept. For the first time since she'd landed in my world, the silence between us didn't feel like a gap. It felt like home. And then, just before dawn, the air changed. I didn't hear anything at first. Just felt it, a pressure in the back of my skull, like a tuning fork struck inside my brain. Leary sat upright instantly. Her hand left mine like reflex. Her breath caught. "They found me," she whispered. She stood, already reaching for something I hadn't seen before, a thin crystal device embedded in the wall behind the couch. With a wave of her hand, it flickered to life, displaying a symbol I couldn't read but understood anyway. Authority. Who? I asked, already on my feet. What does that mean? My overseer. The central directive monitors all long-term field agents. They detected an anomaly. Our bond. The neurological data must have triggered an alert. So you're telling me they're watching you? Not always, she said, moving fast now, hands flying over holographic controls. But during mating cycles, high-risk subjects are monitored more closely. They never anticipated a compatible event. Not this compatible. She paused, turned to me, and her voice dropped into something colder than I'd ever heard from her. They'll come to terminate the contact. I stared at her. Terminate? Like, separate us? No, her eyes held mine. Erase you. The word hit harder than any threat. I'm not going anywhere, I said, without hesitation. You don't understand. No, you don't, I snapped. I may be statistically insignificant in your federation, but on this planet, in this moment, I have agency. I'm not just a variable in your spreadsheet. She looked at me like she wanted to believe that, and hated herself for knowing it might not matter. The light in the center of the room shifted. Suddenly, the air shimmered. Molecules bent inwards. Reality rippled, and then collapsed inward like a breath being sucked from the skin of the world. And just like that, he was standing there. Tall. Unmoving. Skin the color of deep obsidian. Eyes gold and featureless, like polished coins. Dressed not in armor or robes, but something that looked like formality woven into cloth, a high-collared uniform that shimmered with embedded symbols. Field Operative Leary Envares, he said, his voice like sound filtered through water. You have breached interspecies contact protocols and compromised subject autonomy. Leary stepped in front of me without hesitation. The contact was not planned. The bond was emergent. Mutual. The overseer ignored her. His eyes locked onto me. The human will undergo immediate memory cleansing. Emotional imprinting will be neutralized. Physical evidence extracted. You're not touching him, she growled. You are no longer in command of this mission. I stepped forward then, because I couldn't watch this happen in silence. Let me guess, I said. You've run simulations. You've done analysis. You know everything about us, right? He said nothing. So let me tell you what you don't know. I pointed at Leary, my voice rising. She felt. She chose. That's not programming. That's not contamination. That's humanity. And maybe what you're so scared of isn't me, or even her. It's the fact that for the first time, one of your kind felt something you couldn't quantify. The overseer's face didn't change, but something in the air did. A flicker. He raised his hand. A thin, glowing device floated above his palm. Memory reset in progress. Leary moved. Faster than I'd ever seen. She threw herself between us, her own skin beginning to pulse again, not with heat this time, but with fury. You will not take this from me? You are compromised, he said. I am awakened, she answered. And then she reached out and touched the device. There was a flash. Not light, but thought. A surge of data, emotion, memory, our bond, our connection, everything we had shared, colliding with the Federation's authority like fire meeting steel. The device sparked, then shattered. The overseer stepped back, clearly shaken. You have committed treason against the directive, he said. I have demonstrated proof of evolved compatibility, Leary said, standing tall, eyes blazing. If you erase this, you erase a chance at understanding something your algorithms never predicted, convergence through empathy. He stared at her. Then at me. Then, silently, without another word, he vanished. No explosion. No transport beam. Just, gone. The room was quiet again. But the air still crackled with everything that had nearly happened. Leary turned to me, her face pale, her breath uneven. They'll be back, she said. With more authority. With protocols I can't override. I bought time, but not safety. Then we don't wait, I said. We act. She blinked. How? We run. We hide. We fight. We expose what they are trying to suppress. But we do it together. She studied me, like she was trying to memorize the exact structure of that sentence, not the words, but the weight behind them. Then, slowly, she nodded. Together. And for the first time, I saw it. Not just the scientist. Not the alien. Not the subject of some mating cycle from a distant star system. I saw a partner. And whatever was coming next, we'd face it side by side. We didn't sleep the next night either. But this time, it wasn't because of fear. It was because something in us had shifted, not just in response to the threat, but in resistance to it. That night, our bond became more than survival. It became defiance. We weren't just running anymore. We were preparing to be seen. Leary's hands moved swiftly over her crystalline interface, each motion pulsing with quiet urgency. Her systems, once tools of observation, were now weapons of truth. Not weapons to harm, but to expose. To broadcast. To make undeniable what her people had never expected, that love was not just a human invention, but a shared architecture. Something that could build bridges across galaxies. We have the data, she said, eyes locked on the glowing thread of symbols flickering midair. The neural maps. The synaptic echoes. The emotional resonance feedback. All of it. And it's enough. I asked. It's not enough by their standards, she replied, but it's too much to erase. She turned the display toward me. What I saw wasn't language. It was light, two networks overlapping in a chaotic, impossible dance. Hers. Mine. Entangled like constellations redrawn in real time. Not symmetrical. Not predictable. But deeply, undeniably, alive. They'll argue it's contamination, she said. That I let your biology infect the mission. that I failed to remain objective. I nodded. Then let's give them a new word. Not contamination. Not corruption. Convergence, she whispered. We stood together in the middle of the room as she activated the relay, a high-band signal emitter that linked back to her Federation's research servers. A thin ring of light formed around us on the floor, and the air crackled with dimensional tension. The message was forming, not in words, but in experience. I'm going to include the mental imprint from the bonding moment, she said. They'll see what I saw. Feel what I felt. What we felt, I corrected. Her eyes met mine. Yes. We. The pulse went out. Not with a flash, not with sound, but with a gentle ripple that passed through space like the breath of a quiet truth finally exhaled. The data, the neural signatures, the map pathways of two beings who should never have connected, now echoing across a network older than any single civilization. They'll receive it within minutes, she said. And then, we wait. So we waited. Together. I made coffee, not because she drank it, but because the ritual gave me something to hold onto. She sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the sun rise with wide, quiet eyes, as if the desert sky might offer some sign of mercy. And then they returned. 3 of them this time. They didn't shimmer in like before. They simply were, tall, silent, featureless except for the sharp silver glow in their eyes. They surrounded us with the grace of something that did not need weapons to kill. The one in the center stepped forward. Female, or perhaps simply more familiar in posture. Leary and Varese, she said. We have reviewed your transmission. It is substantial. Leary rose. Substantial is not the same as accepted. No, the figure agreed. But it is disruptive. She turned to me. You are the anomaly. You represent deviation. Threat. Or perhaps, potential. I held her gaze. You don't get to erase what we are just because it doesn't fit inside your math. You think your feelings matter to a civilization that's existed for millennia. No, I said calmly. But I think they should. There was a long silence. Then, the alien figure tilted her head. Show us. Leary nodded and activated the portable interface once more. The display filled the room, not with text, not with numbers, but with emotion. Projected like light through memory. They saw us. All of us. The bond. The moment. The neural sync. The silence that was louder than any language. The data became undeniable. The truth became unavoidable. The alien woman stepped back. The silver in her eyes dimmed, as if some veil had lifted. You have not followed protocol, she said. But you have proven something else. Something unmeasured. She turned to her companions. This will go to the council. Leary's voice was quiet but firm. And until then, you will not be detained. Nor erased. You will remain on Earth under observation. I stepped beside Leary, our hands finding each other's again like gravity itself approved. That's fine, I said. Watch all you want. Just don't expect to understand it with numbers. The alien leader gave a nod. It was not warm. Not friendly. But it was permission. Then they were gone. Just like that. But everything had changed. Leary let out a breath, long, ragged, relieved. Her head fell against my shoulder. My arm wrapped around her. No words. None needed. We weren't safe. We weren't free. But we were together. And for now, for this moment, that was the kind of proof no science could ever dismiss. The days that followed were quiet, unnervingly so. No more shimmering visitors. No more pulses of alien light or devices blinking warnings in the corner of the room. Just wind through dry trees, sand swirling across the porch, and the hum of the refrigerator that had finally started working again. But beneath that quiet, everything had changed. Leary remained with me, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That truth meant more than any interstellar treaty or data spike. We shared mornings now. Real mornings. She learned to make toast, though she still didn't understand why burning bread was considered a smell of comfort. I taught her sarcasm. She taught me how to read silence not as absence, but presence. But the question hovered. Always. What now? We were no longer just two people bound by biology or chance. We were evidence. A crack in the wall of something ancient. A deviation the universe didn't expect, and couldn't unsee. And then, one afternoon, the decision came. Not as a demand, not as a command, but as an offer. A message blinked into existence through her handheld device, crystalline, thin as thought, glowing faintly. It read: "The Council has reviewed your proof. Further study is authorized. Voluntary Integration Protocol, approved." She stared at the message for a long time. When she finally turned to me, her eyes weren't glowing. They were wet. "I have a choice," she said, almost like she didn't believe it. "You do," I said softly. "They want me to return. To help document us. To advise on something new. They want me to be the first. And what do you want?" She looked down. "I want, not to be the first. I want to be with you. I want to laugh without analyzing the neural pattern behind it. I want to feel things I can't measure. I want to make breakfast and not think about how it compares to rations on the Helix moons." She paused. "But I also know what this means. Not just for me. For both of us. For our species. For the idea of us." I nodded. "If we say no, we protect what we have. But if we say yes, we give the universe something new to believe in." She smiled, tears shimmering on her cheeks like liquid stars. "You always turn everything into a speech. Occupational hazard of failed comedians." She stepped closer, slipped her arms around me, and whispered into my chest, "Then let's say yes. Together." And we did. Not because we were brave. Not because we wanted to be heroes. But because in a universe built on cold math and cautious diplomacy, someone had to be the ones who chose love. So we stayed. And we spoke. To both worlds. To cameras and councils, scientists and skeptics, dreamers and doubters. We told them our story. Of light and heat. Of language and skin. Of fear and trust. Of a bond that began in silence and grew louder than any war. They didn't all believe us. Some laughed. Some called it propaganda. Some said it was impossible. But enough listened. And in time, others came forward. Quiet voices at first, scientists, diplomats, even soldiers, who whispered of similar feelings, unexplained connections, buried memories of alien eyes that lingered just a little too long. We had opened a door. And the stars were watching. They once told us that love was the most irrational force in the universe. Maybe that's why it works. Because it doesn't need permission. Just a chance,